Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Access Asia. Coming up, students and teachers in Hong Kong fear China is trying to creep into their classrooms. Schools could be the next battleground amid the pro-democracy rallies. Uncertainty over peace talks between the U.S. and the Taliban and violence continues in Afghanistan. More than 1,200 civilians have been killed so far this year. A $32 billion solution or a money pit. Indonesia wants to move its capital from Jakarta to Borneo. There are fears it could create more problems than it solves. Well, from middle school to university, students have been a key part of pro-democracy rallies in Hong Kong, but education could be the next battleground. Beijing wants a pro-China curriculum imposed in schools, such as replacing Cantonese classes with Mandarin and more exchange with schools on the mainland. Our team on the ground reports.
It's the start of another school year at one of Hong Kong's most prestigious universities. But thousands of students are boycotting classes. Events like this have been taking place in schools all over the city for the past week, the continuation of a 3-month-long pro-democracy movement. The city's campuses are fertile ground for protest movements. That's why the pro-Beijing government wants to impose a more patriotic curriculum, something that's already in motion throughout the educational system. This history and liberal studies teacher condemns the censorship of textbooks.
So these are the textbooks that we use. This is the liberal studies textbook on Hong Kong and on globalization.
Colin Lai chooses not to use these textbooks in his classes. In this chapter, dedicated to the 1980s in China, there's no mention whatsoever of the Tiananmen Square massacre.
Actually, most of the teachers, they make their own teaching materials. A few of them would use textbooks.
Beijing's control over education could keep increasing. Authorities want to ban liberal studies classes and replace them with Chinese history in order to impose their own version of events. A dozen establishments in the city already provide this patriotic education, where Cantonese lessons, the local language, take a backseat to Mandarin. For these parents, this should be the norm.
I like this school because there are more Mandarin classes here, and they teach more things about China.
We should have more knowledge about China, because China is our country, our motherland. It's essential to know more about it.
Supporters of the central government believe many establishments do not have enough oversight and fill students' heads with mistaken ideas.
The problem here in Hong Kong is that we, after a century of being a colony, some of us have forgotten who we are. We are Chinese, our own origin.
Authorities in Hong Kong and Beijing believe the protest movement could have been avoided, if only the young demonstrators had been taught to love China from their first day at school.
Well, for over a year, there's been a question mark hanging over the future of peace in Afghanistan. Earlier this month, U.S. President Donald Trump had canceled secret peace talks with the Taliban. In the meantime, violence continues, with children often caught in the crosshairs, whether in U.S. airstrikes or extremist attacks.
A tragedy no child should bear. 10 children from the same family were on the way to school when they picked up an unexploded mortar bomb on the ground, a common enough sight in Afghanistan. The deadly device went off. 7 of them survived, but they lost at least 1 limb each. More than a year later, they are struggling to adapt.
دا ورځ چې په موږ تېره شوه دا ډېره بده ورځ وه دا ورونه خویندې مې ټول په وینو پکې پټ وه او وینې پراتې وې چې موږ غونډ فامیل پکې تباه شو
مارمۍ چې وچاودېدله زه جګ شوم کور ته روان وم چې قدم مې واسطه ولیدم نور ما پسې خپه نه وه.
The children are tutored at home, but sometimes they have to go to school for exams. It's not an easy journey. Blisters develop when their artificial limbs rub against their skin, a painful reminder of their new reality.
زمازرها بعد الزنور جنا كانت شجورة مع زرمي غاوي
War still rages on here, even though the Taliban are in negotiations with the US for some sort of peace settlement. A resolution still seems far off. Decades of conflict have left the nation strewn with landmines and other deadly devices. The UN says more than 900 children were killed in 2018. Another 7,000 were wounded. And though hers was taken away, Rabia hopes other children in Afghanistan can still enjoy a normal childhood.
Taliban حکومت را ټول شي سوله وکړي نور ماشومان شهید نشي خپې ته نه کټ نشي.
Jakarta is home to 10 million people and 3 times that amount in the greater urban area. One of the world's biggest cities. It's also one of the world's fastest sinking cities. And due to those concerns, plus a slew of other problems, the government wants to build a new capital in a jungle on Borneo Island. However, experts warn the new capital is an environmental crisis waiting to happen. Emerald Maxwell has more.
Losing the battle against the sea. This mosque is symbolic of Jakarta's fate if current rates of sea level rises continue. With parts of Indonesia's overcrowded and polluted capital sinking more than 5 centimetres a year, its government wants to relocate.
This is for the realization of economic equality and justice. It's a vision for a developed Indonesia.
The government has earmarked this quiet backwater for its new city, the eastern edge of neighbouring Borneo Island. Unlike islands such as Java, Bali and Lombok, the province of East Kalimantan doesn't have a history of natural disasters. It's also in the centre of Indonesia and close to urban areas. But locals are worried about having to make way for the influx of people. Some smallholders face losing their farms or are afraid of being priced out of the region.
I hope we won't be marginalized. We hope the decision to relocate the capital here will bring us some benefits too.
The new capital is expected to accommodate over 1.5 million people in 15 years. And environmentalists have run alarm bells that it will follow the same unchecked development of Jakarta. The jungle-clad island of Borneo is home to endangered orangutans and already at risk from logging and palm oil plantations. But the government stresses that the €30 billion project is inspired by the greenness of Singapore.
We will not build in a protected forest area. The President announced the Suharto Hill and Conservation Area will enter the development area. But it will still be maintained as conservation forest and will be rehabilitated.
The government says Jakarta will remain the commercial and financial centre, and most of its 10 million residents are likely to stay put. But as the government's attention focuses on its shiny new capital, it's unclear whether it will continue to pay the enormous cost of protecting these millions of people from the encroaching sea.
As China seeks to create a trade and infrastructure network across Eurasia, it is building roads through rural, isolated areas, including the Tengger Desert. With desertification by climate change and other human activities, the government has relocated hundreds of thousands of people called ecological migrants. Many make their living from farming, but increasingly it's tourism. Camille Nedalek has more.
Local Mongolian legend says the sun god fell in love with a beautiful woman, but the Jade Emperor, who ruled heaven, became jealous and exiled her to this desert. Once part of the old Silk Road, it's now firmly on China's tourist trail.
The desert is so awe-inspiring. I can't even put into words how happy I am to be here.
They'll walk for hours in the sand under the hot sun. It's 35 degrees and there's no shade. They plan to hike 65 kilometers in 3 days. No mean feat for a group of tourists.
I have a cramp. I've never had one that lasted this long before. People my age spend all day sat in front of a computer.
The only option is to get up and keep on walking until they can rest at camp.
We have to continue, but it'll be worth it. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
The Tengger is the 4th largest desert in China, and it's expanding and becoming less hospitable. Traditional ways of life are at risk, but still celebrated. A chef is on hand to treat the campers to a well-earned feast of local mutton.
The mutton is roasted for 4 hours. It's a local speciality. The skin is crunchy and the meat is tender.
With just 11 days of paid holiday per year, it makes sense not to travel too far away. And at €350 per person for 3 days and 2 nights, this trip is affordable for Chinese middle-class consumers. It's the last day of hiking. They finally arrive at an oasis with a lake, one of 400 in this desert. And with the trek done, there's still time for a quick photo shoot. After 3 days away from modern comforts, these tourists may be more than ready to return to their own beds and the internet, but glad of having taken a much-needed break.
A new cafe in the southwestern Chinese city of Chengdu has stars that cost $1,400 per head, but they're not for sale. They are, in fact, guests. They are ducks, a domestic breed imported from Europe, and waddle around from table to delight the customers. The cafe is called Hey We Go, and it's in the city center, and many people are showing up. And for the price of 78 yuan, they can spend an hour and a half with the ducks. Visitors can take photos. There's also 2 miniature teacup pigs who are also residents of the cafe. One of the co-founders had said he came up with the idea after raising his own pet duck and said, everyone loves ducks. Quite simple. Well, that's it for this edition. Thanks for watching, and please stay tuned to France 24.